All right, guys. So is Amazon FBA really dead? Is the weak pound killing Amazon FBA? That's what we're going to be taking a look at in this video, and also what you can do about it to mitigate the risks to your Amazon FBA business. So I'm sure all of you guys are aware by now that for the past few months, if we go back to, I think the peak here, that was back in May, we have seen the GBP get super weak against the US dollar. I mean, we're currently down 21% against the US dollar, and I think at some point last week it was down to close to 30% against the US dollar. So with your average FBA product having a profit margin of somewhere between 20 to 30%, losing 20% plus on an exchange rate, is a real big problem for Amazon FBA businesses. So that's why I wanted to make this video. So the first thing I want you guys to be aware of, it isn't just the GBP that is weak. It's not like we are the only currency in the world that is struggling. And if we take a look at the GBP versus the euro, you actually see we're in a fairly familiar range that we've been in for the past few years. So we're not super weak against the euro. Okay, we did get a bit weak last week, but we're still within that range that we've been in since the Brexit vote, I would say. So there's no kind of alarm bells with how the GBP is performing against other currency. The problem is the US dollar is so strong at the moment. You can see the US dollar at the moment is pretty much a 20-year high. So this is the DXY, which is the US dollar versus a number of other leading currencies combined. And you can see it's showing crazy strength at the moment. However, we are approaching this area of historic resistance. So I would expect to see some flatlining in the strength in the coming months, potentially a turnaround. We'll wait and see. So the first thing to know is the GBP is not fallen as bad as you may have been led to believe by the headlines, but certainly against the US dollar, it is a long way down. Still, you will be paying your suppliers in US dollar, so it is a big problem for Amazon FBA businesses. So what can you actually do about this? Well, the first thing is you need to renegotiate with your suppliers, and you're in a very strong position to do so. So if we go back to the charts, this is the US dollar versus the Yuan, which is the Chinese currency. And you can see that since May, so in the same sort of period that we saw the GBP get super weak against the dollar, the Yuan has gone up from 6.3 to, we're currently at 7.06. So a 12% increase. Well, I'll say a 12% increase. It's a decrease of the Yuan. But what it means is that the Chinese suppliers will be getting 12% more because they sell in USD. They're going to get 12% more than they were back in May. So you're in a very strong position to say to your supplier, look, with the dollar being so strong, we need to renegotiate our prices. And they might come back to you and be very reluctant to negotiate, as they always are. They'll make many excuses. But I think there's certainly some room for maneuver. You might not get the full 12%, but maybe you can get 5% or 10%. Anything will help with your FBA business and your profit margin. So that's the first thing. Go back to your suppliers, explain the situation, explain that the GBP is super weak and that the US dollar is super strong, so they're getting more money, etc. And see if you can negotiate a lower price for your product. The next thing I want you to take a look at is how you actually pay your supplier. So this is one area you can save a decent chunk of money with your business, especially if you're placing a large order. So I see a lot of new businesses that when I first start Amazon FBA, they will go and pay their supplier maybe via PayPal or via their credit card, and they don't realize the hit that they're going to take. So I've got the fees here from Alibaba. Now these are only the Alibaba fees. So they're charging you 3% of the transaction amount, which doesn't sound like a huge amount, but say you're spending $10,000, that's a $300 fee on top of that. But in addition to that fee from Alibaba, your credit card company, your bank, is going to be charging you a conversion rate as well, quite often around that 2 to 3% mark. So potentially paying for your order using a credit or debit card via Alibaba is going to cost you somewhere between 3 to 6% of the total transaction amount. So what I would always recommend to anyone that is paying on Alibaba is to use the wire transfers instead. Now these allow you to get trade assurance protection. So when you're going through the payment process, click on the wire transfer options and it will show you the account details that you need to use to actually still get the trade assurance protection. So don't let your supplier send you some account details that aren't part of the ordering process. It must be part of the trade assurance contracts that is created when the order is created. And as long as you use those details, you will get some trade assurance protection. Now, there are two ways you can do the wire transfer. The first is to actually send the money in USD. And this is how I used to do it. So I used to use a company called TransferWise, who are now called Wise.com. And they're very, very competitive and a lot cheaper than going any of these routes. But more recently, I've actually been using this wire transfer domestic route. So rather than paying them in USD, you can pay in your local currency. And I've actually found this to work out very slightly cheaper than using the wires.com option. So definitely check out both of these for your supplier to see how much you can save, because it could be quite a few £100 difference between paying via card. So the first thing is renegotiate, and the second thing is to make sure you're paying with the most cost-effective method possible. Now, before I get on to the next thing, I mentioned in the past couple of videos that the FBA Elite 50 discount code for Helium-10 was being retired. Well, that has now been retired and it's been replaced with this new one, which actually I think is better for people that are serious about Amazon FBA and going to be using it for a few months. They're now offering 20% off for 6 months. So instead of 50% off 1 month, you get 20% off for 6 months, which I think is a much better deal. So to get that, all you need to use is FBA Elite 20, and that will make sure you get that discount when you sign up for Helium 10. So the third thing you can do is to consider using a multi-currency business account. So instead of doing everything in GBP, you can actually keep some of your money in USD. So that helps you to kind of hedge between the currency. So there are a number of providers that offer this. The most common ones that I see for FBA, you have Revolut. They offer a multi-currency account. Also Starling Bank as well. They offer a US dollar business account that you can use alongside your GBP account. And many of the high street banks will probably offer this as well, but it'll be a lot more expensive than some of the online providers. But do your own research on this, but it's certainly an option to have a multi-currency account rather than just working in GBP and having to convert it every single time that you transact with a supplier. The fourth thing, and this is actually good news that I've covered in the past couple of videos, is container prices are continuing to come down. Look, we're down to $4,000 on that index, and on the jewelry index, we're down to under $4,000. These are from peaks back in, well, at the end of last year, the peak was over $10,000, but just going back to May, which is when kind of the GBP really started to get weaker, we're still around the $10,000 mark. So this is helping to offset some of the GBP weakness that we're starting to save a decent chunk on our import costs, as import costs for some products earlier on in the year were more expensive than the product itself. So that gives you an idea of how much these rates are coming down. And I'm seeing that with the updates that I'm getting. I think the last update I got last week, we're down to £220 per cubic meter, whereas I think we were well above £300 at one point, and I'm expecting that to continue coming down as the kind of the retail rates always lag a bit, these rates a little bit as well. So that's the fourth thing. And the fifth thing is to keep in mind is you're actually selling directly against Chinese sellers on Amazon. So that might not sound like a good thing when I first say that, but what I mean is, yes, these guys can actually make these products super cheap, but they're still selling in GBP, just like you are selling in GBP. So that GBP weakness is impacting them as well. So I'm sure you're going to see in many niches, you'll see GBP and CN all over the place. You've got lots of UK sellers and Chinese sellers, but they're not getting a huge advantage because they're in China, because they're still selling on Amazon.co.uk. They're still transacting in GBP, so they're still going to be suffering from the weakness, and they're not going to get as much money as they were in the past for that. And the final thing that I want to go back to is the GBP USD chart. And the reason I want to go through this again is I want to talk to you about timing. So when you pay for your order, quite often you'll split your payment as a 30% upfront payment and then probably 70% on completion. Now, some suppliers might want 100% upfront if it's a small order, or they might offer 50-50 payment terms. But certainly if you've got a larger order, you can push for those 30-70 payment terms. And what that means is you can actually pay that additional 70% at the right time for you, because between placing that initial order and paying the deposit and the product being ready for shipping, there will probably be quite a few week wait, maybe a month or two wait at the moment with what lead times are like. So it's very important to keep an eye on the currency markets, because there may be a better time to pay. To give you an example, I want to place an order with my supplier at the moment, but I saw this huge dip over the past couple of weeks, and if I would have paid last week, it would have cost me 10% more to place that order. Or when you're placing an order for about $8,000, that's a decent chunk of change. So I'm being very patient and I'm holding off ordering, as I believe the GBP has a chance of getting a little bit stronger here before we really maybe head down again. So I'm not saying it's possible to predict the currency markets, but certainly keep an eye on them. And if you're at a point like this and you need to pay your supplier, maybe hold off a bit, because normally after a big move, there's always some sort of retracement. So that's something, try and time your payment as well, if possible, as that is another way of mitigating the risk that the weak GBP has to your Amazon FBA business. So that's it for this video. If you found this video useful, I'd appreciate it. Hit that like button. If you want to see more from me, subscribe to the channel. And what I'm going to do now is pop up a video showing you guys how Amazon FBA has changed my life, and I recommend you guys give that a watch.